We'll just go through the agenda. This is a work session. Discussion regarding budgeted staff positions, job descriptions. These job openings that we have stated budgetary wise, we were going to fill. We need to have some discussion about proceeding with those.
Yeah, Mayor, and to clarify, so you can see who's on screen and who's on Zoom. In the room is Randy Chisel, Kristen Torzel, Wanda Hemstadt, myself, and then we have one member of the public in Janelle Pavlovec.
Thank you.
So you know who's here. Yeah, and thank you. I'd asked the mayor to allow me to put these items on the agenda just for confirmation. It's been a while since we've talked about these. There are a lot of things we talked about in December, January, February timeframe that maybe are slipping our mind because of other issues, especially since March. So I wanted to bring these back, especially now that we are in the current fiscal year. Just to refresh, all three of these positions were budgeted, but there was conversation about at what point in the year, you know, again, whether it be 50% or 75% of the year or whatever that council would allow the hiring of these positions. So I put them in front of you now, stating that staff is ready to go as far as the hiring process. We have draft job descriptions in front of you. These have been through several different reviews, department critique, or whatever. They're probably not final. And generally, our policy or procedure has been that job descriptions are at least reviewed by council, especially for new positions, but they're not necessarily approved by council per se. Approvals, amendments, tweaks over time have traditionally been an administrative function. So we put them in front of you now, job description wise for some conversation, but then we're looking for affirmation to start the hiring process on all three of them.
Hey, Chad, can you review to us? I know the one that I know the library assistant director would be filled halfway through the year. What was the timeline for the other two?
I think the street was 50%, the co-compliance officer.
You just go ahead. Wanda's kind of reviewing notes in her mind and where we ended up on that.
Okay, as memory serves, the street department, that was budgeted at 100%. The co-compliance officer was at 100%, and the library assistant director was at 50%. To the best of my recollection.
That's what I remember. Because I remember Kristen stating that she would most likely not hire somebody till towards the end of December, the beginning of January.
And so even now, if we move ahead with this, I wouldn't see us having anybody on board before the middle of September.
Okay, for any of these, or for the other two?
For the other two.
Okay.
And that would be a little ambitious, but.
And Kristen's in the room, right? Kristen, do you have any changes in need because of COVID, or are you still thinking, a January fill would be okay?
I think January will still be okay. I'm sensitive to the other fiscal considerations of the city. Obviously, the library is closed right at this juncture. Certainly, we have plenty of work that staff is doing right now, but we've gotten along so far throughout the pandemic. Okay, so I still think that January would be a good start date for us.
Thanks.
This is Steve. I would like to say I would still support the street department assistant starting at 100% for the fiscal year, and the code compliance officer the same. And
I agree.
Understanding that the library assistant will be a 50% fund.
Andy Carlson here. I agree, Steve. Ross Hadley, I also concur with that sentiment.
Emily Neal, following my own suggested rules, agrees too.
This is Johanna. I agree with the affirmation of the staffing and the schedule we just talked about. Just a question in terms of job descriptions. Each of these links closely with another position that's currently filled. Were those job descriptions, have they been checked to make sure that there's still leadership clearly defined with one position or the other, and that the relationship between the assistant and director positions makes sense?
Yeah, this is Chad. I don't think there's significant changes there in terms of hierarchy or chain of command, especially with the library and the great position. Maybe Jeremy's got a comment or two that he might want to chime in there, but I think that would be a direct report to him in that department. The code compliance officer, we've talked, and I see that as a direct report to the city manager. I don't think that would change in any way. And if it did, it might be because once the incumbent's here and we've worked through maybe a year or two, there's some unforeseen reason to change that we can't see now. So,
Chad.
Chad, I guess. Oh.
Go ahead, Johanna.
Okay, this is Johanna. Chad, I guess, is there any need to look at your job description? Like, I'm just wondering if anything is being pulled out of something that is in your job description that is now in this job description, or the same for Jeremy's, to make sure that those are sort of cleaned up at the same time.
Right. Yeah, there may be in Jeremy's, although it may be that he still does some of those things, but now he's able to delegate to somebody else, right? And so that might be a department level, just moving tasks around. With the city manager, I guess I'd have to go back and look and see if there's a reason, maybe not so much in the job description, but maybe in the city manager's code function, that there might be something in the code that might get pulled out. But again, maybe we take some time and kind of work through process to see how that works. And while I may have some help with zoning and building related items, maybe it still makes sense that I'm still involved in that process as well, just from a supervisory standpoint, certainly in the short term.
This is Steve. Chad, do you know if currently you're listed as the person who is the secretary for planning and zoning and Board of Adjustment?
Well, the zoning administrator is, and I'm officially appointed the zoning administrator.
So that's a job description I noted in the code compliance officer that is listed for both of those.
So, once we have that person identified and hired, then I think council would need to actually appoint that person zoning administrator, I think, right?
Yep.
Got you. Thank
Chad,
you.
Chad, this is Ross Hadley. Do you think that the short-term and long-term rental inspector would fall under this code compliance officer?
I see this person doing those tasks, yes.
Oh, actually doing them themselves, not,
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. That's where we can save a little bit of money,
Sure.
but I think the person will have the ability to do that and do it fairly efficiently.
Great.
Were there any other, Chad, were there any other compliance pieces that would be included in this position that we haven't talked about?
Well, I don't know that we haven't talked about, there's a lot in there, certainly.
Yeah, there is.
I'm going to scare somebody away, I think. But I also think that it's a position that's not uncommon. So while there's a lot in there, we are starting or creating a department that a lot of cities our size have. Right now, I think just visually, we look at just putting everything in there, but from a practical standpoint, I know Wanda and I do a lot of the nuisance abatement and other sundry code compliance outside of zoning. We'll certainly continue to do that until we get this person up to speed. So it's not like just all of a sudden on day one, we're just going to push all this stuff over. But there is a lot there. It'll take time to get that person up to speed. We'll kind of see how that goes. So.
What other kind of questions does the council have concerning any of these? Most likely the code compliance officer.
This is Johanna. I know there's been conversation about space issues both at streets and city hall. Do we feel like, especially with the COVID environment, that we have workspace to bring 2 new staff members into?
Well, City Hall just would have the one, the code compliance, and we have talked about where we think we can put that person. Again, short to medium term, we think we can use the conference room in the back. Do that, and I think that would work fine. Kristen and Jeremy already have spaces in their departments for a person, so I'm not sure that there's much concern there. Longer term, I think we still need to figure out what we're going to do with this facility or any other for the fire department or whatever. And longer term, that's going to help solve some of that. So.
I had told both Wanda and Chad that I've been at the desk there in the city chambers, which I feel really comfortable right there. I have to move everything in and everything out anyway. And that's worked out really well for me. If there's a meeting or something, I usually go over to the fire department. Nobody's at the table over there, or find another spot. So whatever they could do with those rooms that they have in City Hall would work fine.
Jeremy or Kristen, either one of you have anything to add? Or
this is Jeremy. No, I think you've covered it pretty well. We have adequate space. We've added a couple offices, so we'd be able to have their own office space. And to Johanna's question about kind of overlapping duties, I think, like Chad said, there'd probably be some overlap. We'll certainly double check the job descriptions. But yeah, I see it as a kind of, as it says, an assistant and assisting with different things, but I'd probably still be involved in a fair number of them as well, especially from the get-go.
And if you haven't stopped down to the street department and seen what they've done with the offices up there, I just thought it was a storage, just where you see it, but there's really quite a bit of space and they've worked really hard on it. I suggest stopping in and taking a look.
At the library, we certainly have staff moved around, since formerly a number of people were sharing close quarters in offices. So there will be some sort of exploration and decision making moving forward as we see what the landscape is in terms of shared offices in the coming months when the time comes to hire this position. That being said, I'm confident that we can make space for this person. In terms of duties, this is an existing position that was filled up until I moved into the director role 3 years ago. So the job description was fairly well established at that point, and I've just made some updates and added a few things since that time. So there will certainly be a lot of collaboration between that person and myself, and between that person and other staff, particularly those that are working with adult services and programming, and to some extent with our RSVP volunteer program as well. But I don't see a lot of redundancy between those two job descriptions at present.
So Chad, what other questions now do you have, or you feel confident now just to move ahead with the hiring of those positions?
Yeah, I sense council consensus there, so we'll move forward on the street and the code, and we'll work towards December hiring, or at least start to get that out for the library about that time. So.
This is
Excellent.
Steve. I would like to thank both Jeremy and Kristen for their work that they've done in handling those multi-purpose jobs as they took over as positions, and covering all the bases until we get these situations taken care of. So thank you.
Yeah, Steve, I appreciate that. They've both done yeoman's work for several years. Kristen, at least 3, and Jeremy for about 1.5 years. They've been doing kind of double duty.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, Okay, moving on. Discussion and review of staff proposed city code sections amendments. I'm gonna let you explain these, Chad.
Yeah, and so I apologize, this is a little scattered, but these are the things that are on my pent up list of what kinds of things aren't getting done, right? So I kind of put them out there and thought, well, if we're gonna have a work session, let's at least bring them up and get some council direction, whether they need to come to a committee, if you're okay with us writing them up and getting them to full council. Chapter 1508, property maintenance, is really in response to our junk vehicles. Council adopted the junk vehicle changes a month or two ago, and there are a couple of cleanup items in property maintenance. I tried to write these up in ordinance or code format and get them in your Dropbox. I didn't get them all done. I think the ones I didn't get done, Jeremy did a nice job writing up kind of an overview of what we're thinking and where we're going with those. So, so that's 15.08 property maintenance. It's just to be reactionary to junk vehicles and the number of vehicles, number of items, or even more clearly, some of the definitions in property maintenance that relate back to junk vehicles or just junk in general, I think. I don't know if there was anything else there that, so it's just kind of a cleanup to be complementary to the junk vehicles.
Does anybody have questions on that?
Does that have anything to do with junk houses? I'm trying to go back to it. So
It can, but not so much the physical structure itself, but more what's in and around the yards.
okay. Are we also cleaning up the one around houses themselves?
Yeah, that's what I mean, property, right?
Okay, that's what. Yeah. Well, no, I meant. I'm thinking about. It's fine. Never mind.
Okay, to be clear, property maintenance does cover the outside of the houses, but what we're trying to clean up is in response to the changes we made in junk vehicles in chapter 8,
Okay,
so that they don't conflict with each other.
Yeah.
Does that?
Yes.
that helps. That's what I was asking.
So
Yeah. But we're just not changing that piece of it. It's more the junk vehicle piece.
So I think this one is in the Dropbox, Emily, and so you can see some of the changes in red that we're looking at. In particular, it touches on trailers and gives a better description for trailers. Several years ago, we had a semi-trailer parked in a yard for many, many months. And by definition in the old code, that was allowed because it was one piece and it was a trailer. So we're trying to better define that. Included in description of unacceptable materials, just better clarifies, you know, construction debris and materials and things like that. So again,
Ted, just for clarity, what document are you looking at?
Yeah, I don't see it in my Dropbox. That's why I'm asking. I mean, that's why I was curious.
I've looked for it too, and I didn't see it either.
You know, so I had a deficiency on Thursday and Friday in terms of what I was able to get done or not get done. So if it's
No.
not
And that's not a problem. I just want to make sure I was not not seeing it, because I guess I'm just wanting to make sure that we have a really tight policy about house windows, roofs, exterior. Given that there's a house in my ward that I think is virtually on the realm of falling down, yet seems to just continue to fall down.
is that house yellow?
It is yellow. It is.
We are working on that.
Or the garage that's in Goose Island that doesn't have a roof?
I haven't seen that. That sounds like a tour tomorrow. Okay.
It's, yeah, back behind where Midtown Motel used to be. If you look straight back, there's a giant hole in the roof.
Okay.
When we get our new zoning administrator, I'm all for a socially distanced walking council tour of our wards and buildings and sidewalks.
Could add in the house in Iowa Avenue that's got holes in the roof.
Yeah, we're done too. Yes. Okay.
So, no worries. I think I understand what you're doing with the policy. I just wanted to make sure that I was not missing something in the Dropbox because I had not seen it. And I wanted to clarify what it was.
That's my mistake for not getting in there.
Maybe go ahead and put it in the Dropbox and then they'll know where it's located.
I'll put it in there. I'll put it in that spot.
Okay, that sounds good.
If there's nothing else on that, moving on to chapter 17, 140 and 120. A couple of things on this. Actually, these are being recommended by FEMA, and they are related to the pending firm maps, the flood insurance rating maps that we've been waiting for approval to adopt. I met with the DNR and a FEMA representative last October on several different things, but one of the things that they left me with was you really need to update your F1, and there's two ways to do it. You can either come through, and again, I'm going to check and see what I put in the Dropbox or didn't put in the Dropbox.
This one's the Dropbox.
Yeah. So what I put in the Dropbox are some suggested amendments, but they actually gave me an entire template for F1, which is a whole new section. Now, a lot of it doesn't change, but they do have a couple of recommendations in there that are not in the document you see. And so there's really two ways to go through it. Just amend a few things, definitions and accessory structures, and that's the example that you see, or go through a broader, more wholesale change of F1, and they've provided a template document for that. So this is probably more just awareness for you, but certainly a chance for some input. This certainly, I would recommend go through P&Z for an analysis before it comes to you. So awareness, but a chance for input tonight if you got it.
Chad, this is Ross Hadley. Do you think that it would be beneficial to run this by Michelle Barnes, who just did the hazard mitigation study and would have visibility to other municipalities in the county and how they might have handled it?
Yes. I'd be curious what other cities in the county even would touch on some of this stuff. But yeah, certainly she would be an expert witness on some of this stuff anyway.
So what's the direction for these particular pieces? Are you clear on that, Chad?
Yeah, and I think I'll send them to planning and zoning, and then just keep council appraised of how that process works, and just know that you're going to see these, and you should see these at FEMA's recommendation before you're asked to approve the new firm maps from FEMA.
Yeah.
Very good.
I would just like to have Michelle have eyes on it, because P&Z is great, but nobody on P&Z has done the amount of due diligence or training that she has regarding flood work.
Mitigation.
Yeah.
I know she's on maternity leave, but I don't know how long that lasts, just as a FYI.
Okay. The next three, leaf collection, snow emergency is something that Jeremy's had on his hit list for a while. Sump pumps is something that we've been talking about, I think, in a broader sense at the organizational level for more than a year, actually including you, Todd, Jeremy, several, if not all the council members and other staff, recognizing that we don't have a lot of authority to regulate sump pumps, and we're all aware of problems. Either that they're connected and draining into sanitary, which is a big no-no, or that they're over the curb and down the gutter and out into the street, which is dangerous at best, just due to algae and ice and everything else that accumulates because some of them run year-round. And so the heart of a sump pump ordinance is to create a way to inspect and get them out of sanitary. And then sump pumps coupled with stormwater would be a way to start developing infrastructure to get them underground and away from the street level surface runoff as well. As far as leaf and snow, you see Jeremy's letter. I'd ask him to open his mic and maybe talk through those a little bit.
Yeah, I can do that. So leaf collection, as I noted there, still brainstorming ideas for perhaps some alternative solutions down the road. But I think in the short term, what we would like to ask is to modify the code so that each year, with plenty of advance notice, the street department can post the schedule for pushing leaves into the street. Currently, it's October 1st to November 15th. So by that, anybody can push them out whenever, which as we work towards our kind of ward by ward collection, creates some challenges. And so I think if we can set the schedule each year, the other thing is leaves don't fall according to any sort of schedule. I asked our city forester about that, and he told me the same thing. There's no way to predict really when they're going to fall. So if each year is a little bit different, and last fall was a particularly challenging year in that we had leaves falling, then snow falling, and then snow melting and leaves falling again. So I think this would really help us better manage this service, which is a great service we provide, not looking to eliminate that service, but just to be able to help us manage it a little bit better. And then snow emergency, again, you can see what I have there. Our snow emergency policy has created some confusion, I think, over the years. Right now, as I outlined there, you're supposed to be on one side of the street until we come by and clear that street. And then the expectation is you move your car to the other side of the street. Well, as you can imagine, not everybody is sitting by their window watching for us. We come by at different hours, depending on when it snows, and often have to come back. And there's some streets that are certainly more troublesome than others. But I think what we would like to look at is just to clean it up so it's clear to everybody. When we declare a snow emergency, if it's an odd calendar day, you're on the odd side of the street and vice versa. That creates us having to go back the next day, but we often have to do that anyway. So I think it would clean up a lot of confusion. We're also going to try to emphasize or do a better job of notifying residents when a snow emergency is in effect. Technically per code, it's anytime it snows more than an inch, but I don't know that everybody knows that. So that's the short-term request at this point. I think maybe down the road, we'd also look at possibly when a snow emergency is declared, prohibiting parking on certain streets that have been problem areas for the street department over the years. But that'll be a conversation perhaps for another day. So that's kind of the summary. I'd happy to answer any questions or comments.
Jeremy, this is Ross Hadley. I'd support you on that. And I see that Chief Smutzler is online as well. Last winter, I had talked with Assistant Chief Parker about making sure we're also diligent on code compliance and towing on some of these cars that are just habitually not moved and have a drift. And there was agreement that more could be done with code compliance and working together. And I know that towing did increase last year, but I think that just greater working together to make sure that we're clearing the areas, and just like we do when we put up the temporary no parking signs when you take the drifts down. I think people just need to see a little more exposure on parking, and part of that could be media outreach, education, but people also need to know that we're going to tow.
This is Johanna, and Jeremy, I'm supportive of the switch in days that you propose in snow removal. I've lived in another city where that was the plan, and it felt less confusing and less of a responsibility as a car owner to be watching and to be home when I was supposed to be moving the car. So I think that's a good idea, noting that change is change. And so just getting a really clear, easy to understand set of instructions out for folks ahead of snow, along with this change if we move forward with it.
One question on these, Chad, can you review the process for going through and changing these? I'm assuming that's council vote.
Well, they would be ordinance changes, so they would be an amendment. Jeremy and I can work through final language. Some direction as to whether you want to see them in the committee or bring them straight to council. That'd be a question tonight, where you think you'd want to send them.
So this is Johanna. I think the snow removal one for me is an easy one to move forward. I think that, Jeremy, if you're looking for input on that longer brainstorming session related to leaf collection, that deserves committee time. If the short-term schedule change is something you'd want to see move, we could move on that piece and put the rest of the discussion in committee. I think it would be important to remind ourselves of the cost of leaf collection each year and think about how we're allocating that across city residents. And I also think that sump pumps probably deserves a larger conversation, particularly if they were going to use stormwater dollars, and thinking about which areas of the city we would prioritize there.
Would those all go to street department? Not all, not the snow emergency one.
Not sump pumps.
Sump pumps, which one would that go to, Ross?
Wouldn't that be
Utility.
Wouldn't that be utility committee for
Okay.
stormwater? Yeah.
So the sump pumps would go to utility.
Street
The
would pick up leaves.
leaves would go to the street.
Or not.
Okay.
I actually agree with
Right.
Johanna, Emily, on the leaves. I think it's tricky because not only is it time of year, it's also what kind of trees people have in their yard.
So is it tricky which committee you put it in?
No, sorry, I'm just saying it needs to go to committee.
Yep.
My leaves, this is Johanna, Jeremy, my leaves drop approximately on January 5th. So could I arrange a special pickup date to deal with these sycamore leaves?
I apologize, Johanna. The code currently states past November 15th, we can't pick up your leaves.
Yeah, this is Emily. I'd like to see a policy driven by the types of trees in our yard because I'm right before Johanna with walnuts, you know.
Oh, oofta. Okay, so we know which ones should go to committees and we know which one they can just send
This
down
is
to the
Steve,
council.
I think the street department should be able to just put forward their suggestions in terms of alternating the snow days and the dates for leaves. And the only thing that needs to go to committee is long-term discussion on changing things. But the street department should be able to just come forward with suggestions that make the most sense for how they operate. Is my perspective.
Thank you. This is Chad. We'll move that forward, bring those to you.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Appreciate
Okay, is that clear? Any other discussion on those? Okay, discussion on continuation of residential tax abatement program for 2021.
This is another one that I took some liberty and put it on there since we were having a meeting anyway. And kind of one of those things that, you know, we were supposed to do back in May and June, and again, a lot of other things were going on. If you recall last year, about May or June, you'd had a conversation with several realtors and developers about what it looks like to get a longer lead on approving the abatement program for the following full calendar year. And so that's why I put on here for 2021, really looking at this time to get your consensus on what you think you might want to do for the program for next year, so that those folks involved in the industry have a heads up before the season starts, before the construction season would start, or the planning for the construction season would start, which is typically December, January, right? And so that's why that's on here, just to get a sense of what you think you'd like to do. You want to send it to committee, you want to talk about it more, you want to change it, repeal it, or just let it ride?
This is Emily, and I feel like this is something that is connected to the sustainability plan. So we have many different instances in which that plan is tied to both the passing of building codes and then linking abatement programming to those codes. So actually, I would like to see this go to the sustainability committee. That we would like, I mean, it needs to go somewhere tied to building codes, I guess, in my mind. And it was, we have this specifically outlined in the plan as the incentives for building above and beyond code.
Yeah, so this is Johanna, and Emily, that was my question I had prepared coming to tonight's meeting. Is we know that the Sustainability Committee just had its first meeting, right? Newly established, its work in process. And if I feel like I need some sense of when it is appropriate in their prioritized plan to have this discussion. Is it now, right, in the coming 2 months, or is it a year from now, and we continue the abatement plan for another 12 months as planned, within that time setting up some incentives or connection between abatement to more sustainable building practices? I just don't think I have a sense of where the committee needs to be focusing right now to weigh in on that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we listed it essentially as this year's priority. So if
It
that
is
helps,
listed.
the council, this was listed, it's as the priority was essentially building code and abatement. And then we had MEU stuff. So in the priority list we set and give them. So I guess I'm totally fine to have a conversation with them. I also think that they are willing to meet as necessary to do some of those priorities. So when they were talking about their meeting times, they've set a once a month meeting, but they felt like if there were things that they needed to get going on right away, that they would be open. They just weren't sure yet what their scope is. So they meet again in August, and I think we could ask them this question, quite honestly. And then decide where they wanted to go with it. And if they're like, ooh, we want to wait a year, then we can decide as a council. But if we wait a year on this, I would feel like we're putting our sustainability plan off another year, given the amount of things related to this particular process. I mean, because it's anything from energy to stormwater to,
This is Steve. I think that council has never really had a threshold that said, oh, we need to change our plan because we've reached this threshold. We've never really had a goal about what we're trying to accomplish with this whole thing. So it seems to me the work of the council could be about what is our goal and what would we see as how we accomplish that goal. The sustainability, I think the sustainability committee is no longer. We now have a commission on sustainability. So the sustainability committee, as I recall, was the group who got together to help put all of it together. So I suggest we use the verbiage of a commission as what we just recently appointed and just started meeting. And I think the council needs to have a perspective of what do we want to accomplish through this so that we know what, oh, we reached that, so we don't need it anymore, or we want to go for it. But to have some guideline as to why we're doing it. Thank you.
Steve, this is Ross Hadley. I agree with you. And since you spoke up, I think that the Economic Development Committee would be a perfect spot for this to come. And that the work of the previous work of the Sustainability Committee, could this Sustainability Commission aggregate the data related to property tax abatement and provide it to the Economic Development Group subcommittee for the council to help set vision sooner than later. I guess that would be my druther.
Andy here, I would agree with Ross. I think with the current state of the economy, we should try to get any and all construction that we can going. So I'm fine with keeping the status quo as is for the next year with the abatement. I was honestly leaning towards doing away with the abatement until COVID, obviously, and how that's affected the economy. So just my 2 cents.
And Andy, I'm not in favor of the status quo. I just wanted to make sure. I would like to see some ties to sustainability within the abatement process.
Sorry, Ross. I apologize. I should have said I agree with just the part where you talked about turning it over to economic development.
Okay, gotcha.
Chad, what are your thoughts, especially consider timing and?
So there's still plenty of time. I mean, that was the point of having the conversation in May and June, that if there were changes being thought by the council, that we would have time to work through those for a fall implementation. Again, still allowing for contractors and developers to have that heads up during the winter planning before spring construction. So as long as we kind of keep the conversation moving, whether it's economic development and or sustainability, we do that through August, September, October, and then come out in November and know what we're doing.
Okay, because it's in
And I would-
November. You need the information by November, correct?
That'd be as late as I think they'd want to go.
Okay.
I would suggest that we not lose point that Emily made about this is something that was a goal of sustainability, but that we also recognize this year is a little different than any other we've seen before. So it might be that we have to readjust our timeline a little bit. But point well taken, Emily.
So this is Emily again, and I guess to me, these two things aren't distinct, that they could actually happen simultaneously. So if we are having a Sustainability Commission, which Ross, you'll just have to maybe on the side explain to me what you want, what data you want them to gather that they would have, or is this something just our city departments have? And then I think we could have a discussion at the Economic Development Committee level, and the commission can move forward with the building code discussion. I think there is some amount of idea. We know we've recommended already this idea of passing Iowa's building codes. So if we can pass Iowa's building codes, it's not like we're sending the commission out to go find a building code we should be enacting. If we enact the Iowa building code, then they can offer up suggestions, and maybe it's that, I think it's a paired conversation with economic development. These are our suggestions that we think you should tie to build the building code that you should pass. And, maybe we want to look at a timeline where we'd like to pass that building code, being August or September.
Hey, Chad, are you clear which way to go? And it's,
Yep.
those 3 months, August, September, and October, go dang fast.
Yes, they do. But I've got notes. I got it. Thank you.
Okay,
So I would suggest that the verbiage we're talking about is adopting that building code as our
Yes.
own.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
okay. Discussion regarding face coverings requirements during the COVID pandemic.
Emily,
Yeah.
I'm going to start with the document that you sent out today. I did receive a voicemail from Krista Vanderbrink. I don't know if you want me to share that information first, or if you want to go through your document first.
Why don't you share what she had to say? Mike?
It wasn't a real detailed message, and she sent it towards the end of the day when she was getting ready to leave, so I didn't get a chance to actually speak with her. But on her message, well, first of all, Krista and Wanda and I met last week after the committee meeting that the council had the Thursday before, and talked to her about the council's interest in looking at a mandate or a strong requirement. And then the second prong is looking at education and community awareness, public service, et cetera, which she's all on that. So, we just need to figure out the messaging, the branding, and, how we do it. As far as mandating or requirements or recommendations, however strongly worded, last Tuesday, I think when we met, she had indicated that she would start talking to her board about some of those issues. And of course, they're obviously aware of, kind of where this is trending anyway. But she did get back to me today, and again, just verbally on a voicemail, said that it appears that the Board of Supervisors is not interested in a resolution that supports a mandate or a requirement. And that's literally all I know. That's exactly what she left on my message. She said the Board of Health is interested in a strongly worded recommendation, if you will, or that they'd be willing to support a recommendation for masks in public facilities. And she is actually working with the county attorney on drafting such language as we speak. And then I'll just remind the council that the next Board of Health meeting is August 5th. And Krista and Wanda and I, when we met, we talked about the city, whether that's just me, Wanda, or some of you folks on the council representing, being at that meeting to talk about some of these issues with the board.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Andy here. I just want to take a second before I forget to thank Paul Scott, since I see him on here, and Emily for trying to correct some misinformation out there on social media that unfortunately is like a wildfire right now, from what I can tell. This is a serious issue that we have here with misinformation within our town and county.
This is Paul Scott, and I wanted to mention that I've requested of the Winnebago County Republican Party to remove our DecorahNews.com link because they're trying to justify this statement that they made by linking it to a story that we posted. And in addition to that, we've posted a story for this afternoon and evening and tomorrow outlining our position on this and the request to the Republican Party to remove this information.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul.
So anyways, before we proceed with the conversation, I just want to make sure that we're all clear that what we say can be interpreted in many different ways. So, so we're aware.
That's right.
That's part of the oath we take, isn't it?
I thought it was my way or the highway. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure some people, yeah, never mind.
Well, we wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we didn't have something typed up and something ready to go if we were to come to this juncture where that would be necessary. I think what we put out there is pretty, I'd say par for the course for some of the other cities that are looking to do something like this. I guess it's a little unfortunate to hear that the county supervisors maybe don't feel the same as we do. But
I personally would like to vote on what you all wrote on Monday.
Yeah, this is Emily, and I'm not, I am, as Andy said, disappointed in the supervisor's decision, but I'm not surprised. I think that we are seeing, we're not going to be sticking our neck out and being the first city to do this. I think this is happening. I think it needs to happen. And so I could support something Monday for sure, but I think it's important that we work through and get at what we want out there. And I think we all have to know we're going to get heat. I mean,
yeah,
I don't think we're going to get sued, but I think we're going to get heat.
Here, yeah, I mean, I also have some issues as far as, like, for example, I don't know if I could go along with something if we're going to also endorse the Pulpit Rock Party. I think that's awfully hypocritical, like I said last time. I guess the mayor would have to be on board, I would assume, since you could veto this, I'm sure, Mayor Borowski, if you'd like to. So I guess I'm curious as to what you think and kind of where you stand on this.
I talked to Johanna a while this morning. I think one of the things that is hard, since is that we don't have the power to be able to make a mandate. I think it was clear from the Attorney General's, from the Iowa Attorney General's statement, and it was clear from our own lawyer as well, which is hard for me to try and think about a mandate that we don't have legal stance to be able to do that, and then to try and have our police force enforce something that we're not sure legally if we can do. I need a little more clarity on that piece, I think. I definitely, I told Johanna that I was definitely for writing a letter to the governor and encouraging her to make it available for people in whatever area, whether it's a high traffic area where there's a lot of infection or not so much, that they have the ability to be able to govern the way they want. I guess the real piece for me is first of all, is a scientific point to the masks part, where it's extremely helpful to be able to have that, but it really requires, for preventing requires all the other steps as far as hand washing, distancing, not just the mask. And so there's a piece of that I, and if you're making a mandate and stating that that's going to be governed, I have questions that way. I guess when I looked at this piece, and Emily, was this looked quite a bit like the one that Rochester put out? Is that correct?
So, yeah, this is Emily. And yes, Mayor, I think what's helpful, quite honestly, is both the mayor of Iowa City and the Johnson County attorney have also taken a look at this and have found sections of the Iowa Code that I think will question the Attorney General's statements, to the point that I think we do have some ground to stand on in terms of making the mandate. And so I feel comfortable that there is certainly sections of the code that would allow us to do so. And then to your point about sort of how do we mandate this? What kind of enforcement does it take? I think both Rochester and Iowa City have thought of this enforcement very similar to actually what we did very early on when we heard that Fairway wasn't wearing masks, and Chad went and talked to the manager of Fairway, right? So there's a certain amount of, we're doing a lot of education and talking to people. There's certainly a strong warning system. And at the end of the day, we're all trying to educate people about wearing masks. But if we don't mandate this, and if we don't require it, we'll have a significant number of people not wearing them. And according to the CDC, the only way to really to prevent community spread, or at least to protect your community, is to get people to wear masks. And the more people wearing masks, the more it actually works.
Mm-hmm. I think that one thing, and I'm not familiar, I know that Minnesota and Wisconsin have a little bit different governor that states a little differently, whether they're a little more free to allow cities and whatever to do what's working, what they think is best. I'm anxious to see, as far as the Iowa City piece is, I mean, when you're looking at a population in Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, it's extremely, I can understand where it's needed there. On the mayor's listserv, I noted that Coralville has decided to go with a resolution versus mandate and putting information out. One of the questions I have with this is if the city actually has power to be able to direct the for-profit business on what they can do and not do. I'd like a little more information. And, I was not sure if we had the city, since we don't have the power from the state, how we can mandate to a business such as a restaurant and bar that they have to have masks. That questions that. So I know to begin with, we talked about trying to go through the public health, I would say, and at least approach the Board of Public Health, because I do believe they have the power to make a mandate. I know we also talked about putting out PSAs and doing mass information. I guess I'd like to see also maybe whether council go around to some of the restaurants and bars and get feedback on where they're at. I am not saying at some point I would look at this more, but I see the other piece too is the turbulence that's in social right now as far as police are concerned, and then having them be the ones that are doing the enforcement of it. I can see that being contentious from the citizens, and they could be contentious with that. I definitely feel that we need to put out strong PSA with a time frame maybe that says this is what we're looking at. I am not in favor of perhaps doing it at the next city council meeting, because I think there's more things that need to be looked at legally. The one question I'm going to bring up too, which is, I know came up sometimes when we were trained, and I know that, let's say that the governor does go in against, or even with anything, if city gets sued, Chad, can you talk to me about what the difference is if the city's is sued or if it's the mayor and city council that's sued?
Yeah,
Work.
towards the end of last week, and I haven't had a chance to dig into that any deeper. What the mayor is really getting at, where'd she go? Who left? Somebody just left. What she's getting at is if the AG or the governor's office would file a suit or a claim against the city, is that against the city as an organization or as 7 council people and the mayor as individuals? And I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
So this is Johanna, and Lauren, I think that you're reiterating the points that we discussed earlier this morning, and I think for me that they're the questions we need to talk about, right? I think framing this would be helpful for everyone. We took action in Resolution 3113, right, which we knew was action that was within our authority. We could push to advocate our governor. We could offer our governmental voice support to other governmental entities in our county, and we could launch a campaign. Since that action, council has indicated that we would like to do more. I would like to do more, right? So doing more includes launching a campaign that is specific to Winnebago County. Chad, very helpful to have the update to you that it sounds like Krista is on board to those conversations. I would recommend that out of tonight's meeting, we set up a small group to support that happening. A council person, Lorraine, I think you might be interested in those conversations and to work with Krista. The second thing I think in terms of action that I would be interested in supporting, and Lorraine, we were able to talk about, was to strengthen the message to Governor Reynolds, right? To be louder advocates on behalf of local control and to give her additional support and backing in hopefully making what will be a tough decision and to require masks statewide. Just this afternoon, 15 medical organizations signed such letters of support and delivered them to her office today, right? So let's put our voice behind that campaign. I would recommend that an action out of tonight or a follow-up out of tonight's meeting is that we draft some of that language, and Lorraine, I've already offered to help with that. I believe that you as a mayor could send that on behalf of your position and would support you to do that. I think what we should really talk about tonight, those things feel like there's at least a consensus of the majority to move forward, right? No one's screaming at me on the screen right now. I think what we should talk about tonight is what do we what is our level of interest in pushing for a mask requirement? And it seems to me that we have two paths forward. One is to work with our Board of Health. We've got a meeting on the 5th. It's a public meeting. We can be there. We can message to them beforehand. And we have open conversations with the Board of Supervisors. And don't anyone take a voicemail from a third party who's not a supervisor to be their vote, right? So I think one path is to work through one legal option that our attorney, John Anderson, put before us. Lauren, I'm hearing from you that it's important to go through that process. Like, let's try that way. That means we have to go to this meeting on the 5th. To that light, Emily sent a document earlier today to not just show up at that meeting and be people complaining, but rather to be partners to say, not only are we asking you to seriously consider passing a mask requirement, this is what we want it to look like, right? Not to have, we've floundered through these conversations with the what ifs conversation. We want to offer some workshop here. I'm here tonight to have that conversation. How do we get this draft to a place where a majority of us would support getting through that August 5th meeting to see if that road is in front of us? We're also here, Andy, I think to your point earlier, that if that doesn't work, we would still be interested in taking action for the safety of our community, right? I don't know if that gives people enough of a pathway to dialogue about the questions, because this is not final, right? Like, we have questions, we need input about some of these things. I just hope that we can have that discussion and not get lost on the, like, do we or do we not take action on Monday?
One of the things is that each of us as individuals, and you know, Johanna, I'm assuming it's just a matter of contacting the governor along with the mayor sending it, or mayor and council, whichever way. But each of us as individuals can actually contact her and also just to strengthen the message that's coming. One of my things is that they know that some of the council people have talked together about what they're feeling and how it should work and stuff. How would you foresee being able to have community input for transparency as far as community input as well for working with the potential of a mandate?
This is Emily. I feel like I've gotten quite a bit of community input in the last week on this. It's easy for me to say, it's pretty overwhelmingly, I think Steve echoed it, pretty overwhelmingly supporting a mask mandate. Some of it is conjunction with pulpit, right? And I think I would still encourage us to have those conversations separate, but I guess I feel like I don't we're getting lots of public input right now on it. I don't feel like we're not.
Well, if you're talking, I understand that piece. I think what I'm looking for is public input in the city council setting versus just out in public at a city council setting.
Mayor,
So if we,
Mayor,
go ahead,
this is Ross. What if we use something similar to the Decorah area group that was used for power? Because the reason I would support more efforts toward a mandate as a city is to support the school system and support the hospital and support Luther and support the business community who have all signed on to mask mandates. And if we can show the governor a unified front that you could present on behalf of the city, I feel like that would be beneficial. But and I'm sorry, I don't know whose point it was, but to have the language of what we would propose be reviewed by those peers in a public setting and get their support on it. You know, we, Winnebago County Memorial Hospital, support the language of
Yeah.
the city of Decorah. We, Luther College, support the language of the city of Decorah. We, things like that. So perhaps it is good to go to that meeting on the 5th with the language so that everybody can have exposure to it.
Now Chad is, in looking at what she put forth, have you or John taken a look at this with recommendations?
I don't know that we
No.
have any recommendations
Okay.
at this in terms of the actual document. There are some points that John did get back to me that I will get out to the council. Some of them, some of them are just kind of the technical pieces, like I think in page 2, for example, it says until further council action. So one of the things that John says there is to have a specific date. And if that means that you even need to come back then before that date, but have that date there versus leaving it open-ended. So some of the, and there's not many comments here. So that's one of them that's probably more technical. The other one, again, I think it's on page 3. As far as enforcement, don't talk about what it's not, talk about what it is. So the comment there is that this is not a criminal offense. Take that out of there and say, this is a municipal infraction as far as enforcement goes, right? So again, a couple of technical things like that. Probably the biggest piece there, I think, that he kind of comments on, if it is to include a business establishment, who potentially is penalized? The business, a patron, the business and the patron, all the patrons. You just need to find that kind of clarity in the document, right? And then he's got some other comments in there of things that we'd already talked about before about where does this authority fall. He makes a comment that he's working with Andy Vandermountain on some things that, again, as I mentioned at the start of this discussion, that Andy Vandermountain and Chris Vanderbrink are talking about and we'll bring to the board on the 5th. And John's been involved in those conversations as well.
I think, can you tell me what the one piece about being able for a city government being able to dictate or state to a for-profit business what they can and cannot do? Is that, I have no clue. That was a flag for me.
Well, I think that goes into the whole notion of whether a municipality has this authority or not.
Okay.
I think those municipalities that are asserting that the authority is there is for any place that has public access.
Yeah,
This is Randy. I got one question though. How many businesses outside of Walmart and I can think of Decorah Bank require masks now? So the
Food
for-profit,
co-op.
they
Co-op.
can,
the chick hatchery.
okay, they can require them. So those businesses downtown, if they truly wanted to do this, they could do it without our say-so. Or any business or entity in town could have that. It's like the no shoes, no shirt. It's just a socially accepted norm. So if you don't want people in your facility without masks, you just post that on the door.
This is Emily, and I think the notion behind a mask mandate, right, is that we are facing a public health emergency, and because it's a public health emergency, there's a certain amount of it's important to have a consolidated effort. And when we're talking about a mask mandate, the idea that businesses can choose, it's kind of like the reason you can't opt in and opt out of a mask. It's the same reason. For a mask policy to work, it's kind of we're all in or we're not. We're spreading the virus or we're not. And thinking about our public schools, they did go out on a limb to require masks. And I think that we are, in truth, supporting our schools with that. I also wanted to jump in and say what was presented to the council this morning is a draft that we're hoping to work through. It's not a legal document that we're like, hey, we got all these things figured out. It was ideally like, this is a work session for us to put in our ideal policy. And then the other thing I want to say is I think one of the reasons to do the mask requirement is in some ways it's an economic development driver in that you don't have businesses pairing against each other trying to decide this. So if a business says to himself, I'm afraid to put in a mask requirement because I'm afraid people are going to walk out. Well, if everywhere you go in Decorah that has public access is a mask requirement, it's known. People are going to come and visit Decorah and know they have to wear a mask because that's what we do in Decorah. So it alleviates any pressure, I guess, a business would have to feel and takes the onus off them. They know what the regulation is.
And this is, Johanna, I think to that point about this definitely being a draft to workshop is that the last couple of times that we've talked about this at committee or council table, the devil's in the details, right? So there's been very good examples proposed of what would happen in this situation. And I think that I felt like until we were looking at something solid on paper, we wouldn't be able to truly throw a scenario against it. So for example, I had mail delivered to me today. And so I thought about my postal worker and how they would fit into this policy. I went to the farmer's market on Wednesday and I thought about how would I have to go to the farmer's market if this ordinance was passed. And Emily, you brought up how would I order ice cream at the Whippy Dip or the Sugar Bowl and how would that feel? So to me, this is, before we can take action on this, we have to throw our real life Decorah context at this draft. It is, Lorraine, to your question earlier, it is a mixture of, it's the bones of Rochester's policy because it was the first one we sort of grabbed hold of on a full council level, with quite a heavy infusion from Iowa City because Iowa City is our fellow Iowa town, right? And so there were local state context things that made sense to that. And I think there are clearly some questions noted in red or italics, and there may be issues that are of concern that are not in italics or red that we would want to talk through. Again, should we find ourselves with the Board of Health talking about this or finding ourselves taking action later on?
Yeah, one of the questions is comparing Decorah to Iowa City as far as population numbers, number of cases. I know today when Krista gave hers, and when I looked up, we've had 71 cases so far. 51 of those, I believe, are recovered. I believe that 19 of those remaining, Krista has stated that there's a protocol that they go by where they monitor them, and then there are some that the severity of the case was very minor. They may have tested positive, but their symptoms were very minor. I know that the CDC has changed some of its requirements. I believe it's a milder case. They can quarantine for 20 days, I think. Know what all that affects has, but I think it's worthy of looking at something that fits for our area by taking advantages of some of the wordage that they use in some of the bigger areas. I feel there just needs to be more discussion and work, and then also, you know, research.
We want to have, I think the point is we want to have this discussion now, right? I mean,
but I don't have all the information now.
But
But science, Mayor, science.
Yeah, no, we're going to use, I think the idea is not that I'm going to wait till we have an explosion of cases. We don't have UIHC at our hand, right? We have an explosion of cases. We got a problem here in Decorah. Winneshiek Medical Center has already told us that. They can't handle large numbers of cases. We had 5 people in one day diagnosed in Decorah, which sounds like nothing, but it is when you're talking about 150,000 deaths. So I guess I'd rather not wait till it gets here.
I can understand that piece. I'm just saying that between now and Monday for a vote, I feel that's a short period of time.
I don't want to vote Monday. I want to work through the document right now. I'm not suggesting we vote Monday. I'm suggesting we draft a document that we take to to the Winneshiek Board of Public Health and say, this is what we're thinking. I like Ross's idea. This is, hey, school district, this is what our thinking. How does this align with what you're doing?
Understand that piece.
I'm just looking to workshop this document in a work session that we have now, as opposed to Johanna, Andy, and I sitting there going, this is what we think would work. No, what do we want? In a dream policy where we can help our community be proactive against this virus, what is it that's important to us? You know, Iowa City has an indoor-outdoor policy. Rochester has an indoor-only policy. When we talked, we said, well, we want an indoor mainly policy, but we want to acknowledge that there are walk-up windows where you should be wearing a mask. Johanna just brought up the farmer's market. We should think about that. In red in this document, we put the pool, because this would, if we use the pool, we'll be changing slightly what we've already done. The idea is to talk about what we want and put it in here.
Andy here, and I just kind of want to piggyback off of Emily's comment. And I do agree, Mayor, that Decorah is different than Iowa City, which is why we tried to do exactly what Emily said and look at it. How can we tweak this to more fit Decorah? Because yeah, Johnson County is 150,000 people, 20,000. They have university hospitals at their disposal. We do not. So there are things where, we don't have mass transportation per se like Iowa City does, but there are issues that we face, that are a little different. So I think we've taken the time to really look at this and see, try to tweak it to fit Decorah and kind of our community. So I'm more than happy to discuss it this evening. Like I was saying.
Okay, in that case then, at the beginning, as you're going down, whereas, if you want to look at it, is that what you want to do? Like look at it individually in that fashion?
Mayor, this is Chad, if I might.
Yeah.
You've got Chief Smutzler on the call here, and he's kind of on the front line in the trenches. I know he wrote a letter to the council 2 weeks ago, and he's seen this document as well. Maybe some input from him at this time would be helpful.
Okay, that sounds good. Chief.
I'd have to take a look at the document again. I guess I didn't prepare enough for the meeting. If we've got it in the email, I can pull up now and take a look.
When we look at this document, I might suggest, I feel like the whereas, John's going to have significant input, I guess, as we're taking our time as council. I'd be much more interested in the therefores, like what is it that we're actually asking of our community? Again, we know we're going to need a date. We don't need to decide that now, but I guess in my mind, I want to focus on what it is we're trying to do within the community, not the legality of why we're doing it.
Andy here. I would say, I think our biggest thing is education, right? Nobody wants to anybody a criminal citation or anything like that, or a $300 trespassing. That's a joke, by the way.
But one person, I'd like to give one person that.
But my point being, this is to help educate. This isn't to use up resources or to, this is something to just help people hopefully stay safer, right? And give businesses, schools, other, alleviate some of that pressure that some of those other people and entities are facing. Kind of like I think Ross and Emily both said.
So Andy, you're sort of grabbing it from the bottom of the document, right? To talk about, so we say that in some contexts masks are required. We're defining where masks would be required in Decorah. With that definition, then we need to answer what happens should you not be wearing a mask in one of those areas. I'm supportive of an education forward plan, right? So to me, that means education as a priority, multiple steps of verbal warning. That means a requirement for public access spaces to have signage that says masks are required, right? So a requirement on anyone who has public access space. And that I think we've talked a little bit about, third or fourth warning, there's a small fine, right? Like, I don't know, it could be $15. And I would also mirror some of the Johnson County supervisors and Iowa City Council language about understanding that this is education forward, right? And I think that's a good thing. Like, Andy, we should workshop that a little bit. Like, did you disagree with anything that I just said there? Is there something that's missing in the language here?
Well, I mean, a citation shall be last resort to obtain compliance is pretty vague, and I don't know what that would look like. I mean, I guess this is situation dependent, probably. You know, if someone's leave the premises, or, you know, the last thing we want is anyone being arrested or scenes, essentially, that could come up from this. So I don't know. I'm asking you guys, what do you guys think?
So Andy, that last phrase is direct from Iowa City. So that is the language that they provide. My understanding from news sources is that there was additional language provided to law enforcement about the nuance of what are the many steps we support you taking before a citation would be given, including verbal warnings, etc., asking to, you have the choice to leave the premises if you are not willing to put a mask on. So Chief, if you're willing to look at this, now and in follow up to the meeting, I think that's something where we would really need input and guidance about reality, right? How these words become reality.
Keep in mind too that a citation is an arrest. If we stop somebody for that, that's number one, is detention of someone. Even a traffic stop is a detention and an arrest. If we stop you for speed, we arrest you for speed, that's a citation. So that's the same thing going into effect here. If I stop somebody for a face mask, that's a detention of someone. If I write them a ticket, that's an arrest of someone. Just keep those things in mind as well.
What's happening at Walmart now? So if someone doesn't wear a mask in Walmart, what happens?
They're asked to leave. We don't enforce a mask ordinance or a mandatory mask covering by a business. What we do is they've got the same rights, the no shirt, no shoes, no service. So if someone refuses to leave and someone wants to cause an issue over that, then we do what we can to get them out of the store. It's the same thing we've done throughout the entire COVID pandemic. When we've seen people gathering in groups larger than 6 to 10, whatever the requirements were, we get out and educate, and everybody's real good about breaking up. When we saw people that weren't social distancing, we got out and explained to them, hey, you need a social distancing to keep some space. People were good about breaking up. We try to do the same thing when we get called to Walmart. We want to try to get the people to put a mask on, leave the store, kind of end things peacefully. If it did not end that way, there would be an arrest for criminal trespass.
So Chief, Andy here, it wouldn't be much different then probably than what you're already doing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, things would stay pretty close to the same, with the exception of if somebody wants to raise an issue, and I think you're going to have those people.
Sure. Yeah, I don't doubt that.
The piece on the about the restaurants, retail business, did that come out of Iowa City? Did that come out of Rochester? Or can you talk to me a little more about that piece?
The bolded categories were mirrored from Rochester. Each of them were edited based on the realities, like we don't have hockey rinks because we don't live in Minnesota. And there was some additional definition that was in Iowa City that I felt a couple of things were helpful. I'd seen business owners in Iowa City using that language directly from the proclamation. And so those were sort of inserted in there.
And so, let's say there's a violation, excuse me, sorry. Let's say there's a violation. Sorry.
You're way more popular than me, Lorraine.
Maybe I'll just put in the back. Just forget it, it'll stop. Well, let's say there's a violation in a restaurant on the restaurant. Then I was at work with a restaurant owner with, it says restaurants and bars must include the COVID-19 preparedness and the customers face mask covering when not seated at their table. Maybe it's in the enforcement. No business I think it's no business that is open to the public may provide service to a customer or allow a customer to enter its premises unless the customer is wearing a mask.
These are the Iowa City, actually.
Okay.
So, and you have to, I mean, the Iowa City one is actually more stringent than the one here because remember, Iowa City is also saying you have to wear them outside. The Iowa City order is much more directive. I think one of the ideas is that we're combining what's already happening with our public safety folks with what was happening with Chad, right? So if the city is getting a bunch of complaints that at such and such business, nobody's wearing masks, Chad, as he did with Fairway or whoever wants, whoever we designate to do it, can call it up and have a discussion with the manager that's, hey, we're getting a lot of complaints at the city that in your store, this is going on. How can we assist you with this? Can you, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. But it's a conversation about, we're requiring masks, and as space open to the public access, people need to be in masks, that kind of thing. In Iowa City, because Iowa City is so many bars and restaurants, Iowa City has the ability essentially to revoke liquor licenses or put holds on them. And so if a business has repeated violations about people not wearing masks in their business, they'll either revoke or fine related to the licenses that they have at the city. I'd say we don't have that many bars and restaurants, but it would be an option for us that it's a violation against your city permits.
Let me just speak real quick, Dave Smutzler again. A lot of the times the businesses and bars fear that and the license restrictions more than they fear us or a citation. So if you're talking about bars and businesses, that's another angle to go at. I know when COVID first started up and they closed the bars down, we had one bar in town that was going to try to stay open. And all we had to do was say, hey, listen, it's a fine from us, but if we get a hold of the liquor commission, you're going to lose your license. And they shut down.
Yep.
So Lorraine, I think for the situation that you were putting forward about, say that there's a restaurant and there are people there who are not wearing masks as they move around the public space and use the public restroom, that sort of thing. For me, that there's a request and an education to the individual who is not mask wearing, right? That primarily it's an individual enforcement level. However, paint that situation a little bit differently. There's a restaurant who refuses to post a sign that says masks are required in Decorah that, openly sort of promotes and encourages customers to not be wearing masks. Then the education is to the business owner and that property. To me, it's not, if someone didn't wear a mask in your business, I'm now in trouble. Like that's not an instantaneous connection, or I wouldn't want our policy to read that was an instantaneous connection. I think one of the discussion points that we had not come to agreement upon definitely is definition of face covering. So I found some policies define a face covering as a cloth covering, which I felt like was restrictive to the emerging styles of masks. And if someone has a more protective mask, I don't want to ask them to move to a cloth mask. I am also encouraged by the number of people who feel more comfortable in a face shield, who have not been masking prior and would personally be supportive of any type of face covering. But I know that that's not defined here, and it would be interesting to know what others think about that.
I don't believe that face shields alone provide the level of protection from particle matter. I would not be, I understand that there are people that have a concern with masks, but I don't believe that the science supports a shield alone.
So this is Emily, and I was originally supportive of the face shield. The only thing, and I agree with Ross, essentially, if we wanted to have, if the rest of the council is like, we want to do face shields, I think it's really important that when we write it, we indicate that we know that their effectiveness has not been as proven as cloth masks, because I think it really is the two combined. That is what is being recommended. A face shield alone is not, has not been endorsed by the CDC. And it's a little bit like when we were talking about 2 and 5-year-olds. I feel like we're kind of all in with the science of the CDC. And so I kind of want to remain all in with the science, as opposed to trying to pick and choose what science we want based on people's comfort level. I was also trying to mirror what both Luther and the school were doing. That, as an aside, that was the other thought behind it, that I think that in schools, they really are about the cloth. In Decorah schools, they are requiring cloth masks.
And Andy, if they don't wear the masks, then they're not allowed in school?
I haven't talked this. I don't know. I do not know the details of that yet.
Okay, yeah. I wondered if, has anybody talked to Mark Lane as far as what the advantages are for the city to go with a mandate?
Mark Lane was actually one of the first people I talked to about it when we were thinking about putting this together and approaching the rest of the council, because we wanted to get an indication what the school was going towards and if this would be beneficial. And his words were, oh yes, this would be hugely beneficial. And my understanding, just from talking to my own administration, is that not wearing a mask in class is going to be equivalent to the kind of things that you'll see if you're not sitting in your desk, or if you're not doing whatever the teacher is asking, right? So you'll get a warning, you'll do this, you'll have to go sit in the hall or go to the principal. I mean, that they will be serious about masks. And thinking about our schools, it is quite honestly why I find this to be time sensitive. We all want our schools to open in the safest possible way. And as I think about the one graduation party in Winnebago County that seems to just keep spiraling our cases, we can trace many of this uptick to one event. And I guess I would much rather be going into schools knowing we've been masked up for 2 weeks than going to schools knowing that nobody's been wearing a mask for 2 weeks.
Is the school requiring people to wear masks as they go to their athletic stuff?
As they go there or during athletics?
Either or, currently.
They are required to wear masks indoors in school. I have not heard about the athletic events outside.
The language that we've been messaged to as parents, which is been messaged that it's waiting school board approval on their August 3rd meeting, is that there is masks are required except when outside social distancing can be maintained essentially, and that is being workshopped both for outdoor educational and in relation to athletic sports. And we have separate athletic protocol that comes out for athletes in each of the sports, right? So I have that information for one sport, but not others if my children aren't in those yet. So I think what we don't know, Chopper, right, is what is going to be the indoor basketball protocol and how that will be different than an outdoor baseball game.
It might end up being dependent on the type of sport. If it's close contact, if it's singles tennis, I would assume they wouldn't make them wear one. If it's football, basketball, things like that, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know what that's going to look like.
And isn't that largely a state athletic association? Isn't there continuity in athletics? I think we should be focusing on indoor to support equity in indoor and unity in that regard. Let's let the schools and other associations handle how outdoor works.
I agree.
I agree.
Except for parties that want to happen in our parks.
What?
Except for parties that want to happen in our parks.
Oh,
So what's the direction for Monday, August 3rd?
I would like to see the council vote in favor of supporting public health and the rest of the community endeavors and try to teaming up with them to make a unified approach.
I feel like we did do that last Monday, didn't we?
That was
I
that
guess-
resolution, right?
What?
This is Chad. I think that was resolution 3113 was kind of what
Yeah,
Steve said.
you
I
did
guess-
that already, I think.
Yeah, I would propose that we clean this up a little bit, maybe have John help us with some of this. I propose that on August 5th, we take this document to the Public Health Board with the notion that this is what the city is interested in doing. Maybe there's some workshopping there. I would like to see us this week get endorsements from the Winnebago County Hospital, the schools, and Luther College. Ross, you had talked about economic development. I'd like to see that happening this week if a couple of people would be willing to take that up. And then if the public health decides not to do something, or if they do, I guess I would like to see this come up for passage, not in our first meeting in August, but our second one. And I would be actually open to a special meeting if we really wanted to do 2 weeks before school starts. Then I would be up for a 7 a.m. passage of this in support of our school starting on the 24th of August.
Yeah, we would still have our second council meeting on the 17th. So
We'd be okay.
I don't
Okay.
think third isn't that pressing. I mean, we still have a week before school starts for our meeting the 17th. Yeah, and maybe asking businesses that would be happy to sign up to or to be supportive of this. I think there's probably more than we believe. I'm sure there's some that don't want to as well.
Well,
Nothing else, I would say the owner of the food co-op and Decorah Bank and Trust would be two that should be asked.
'Cause I think I went into, I was gonna start going around and going into the business downtown. I went into WOW, that's the women's dress shop. She had masks on, people in there had masks on. But I'd be interested in knowing also how many restaurants already do this. But
Would that affect your decision somehow? I mean, it's an interesting metric, Lorraine, but what work would that do?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of
well,
restaurants.
for one thing is you know that you'd already have the support, so you've got some support going for you already.
Sure. Maybe I'll check with Christina at the chamber and see if we can take it to the chamber retail committee, similar that Chad and I did with the flag policy.
Yep, because I think those endorsements would be extremely important to go along. I agree with Emily's timeline. And then also working on the beginning part with John and Chad. And then I'd have to look at it a little closer as well. I mean, I did read through it. I just had those questions that I need to work through in my head.
Ross and Johanna, maybe if you guys want to just write on this document some idea about face shields, like what your thought is on it, or if people have I think face shields are one of the big questions. I think we need to think a little bit about our pool, because we're saying that indoor you know, and maybe it is that the pool right now is doing the 6 feet. You have to be 6 feet from someone, but are there places in the pool where you can't be, that we need to be thinking about masks? And then Johanna, I think your question as to the farmer's market, masks are required there. So do we actually need to address that in here at all? If we already know that the farmer's market is requiring it. And as to your point, Steve, parties and parks, I mean, we could say that if you're going to gather in one of our public parks with more than, blank number of people and you can't be 6 feet apart, you got to put on a mask. We can totally put that in our policy if we wanted to.
Well, one thing is to talk with Andy and check to see what suggestions he has as far as what he's heard from other park and recs that are doing the mandate.
And to your point, Mayor, I did check a little bit. The only thing I wanted to clarify, because I know it's been a concern, about private businesses that are open to the public, right? So private businesses that are open to the public are subject to a certain amount of public law within them. So a private business can't do whatever they want within their private business. They still have city ordinances that they have to follow, state ordinances and federal ordinances that they have to follow because they have public access.
Yeah, Emily, if you have any direction where to find those things in the code, that would be helpful.
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll just write an email to John and he can tell you that, but yeah.
I can do that.
I'm not a lawyer, but I got like 4 of them in my family, so.
Well, I'll check with John on that. And then I think any type of input that Dave would have as well, as far as wordage is concerned, when you're looking at citations, that would be extremely helpful.
I can take care of that right now. Let's not have that in there.
Not have what in there?
Citations. Again, that's arrests. I don't know if you want to get into that. I don't know if that's going to get us in the lawsuit.
What is it? What is it? What was your suggestion? Not citations?
A municipal infraction, Dave?
Oh yeah, I think I put that somewhere. I changed. I liked that.
Was it different? It wasn't citation.
A fine or incentive for no infractions. What happens? Administrative action?
Education.
The education I'm a fan of. That's what we've been doing the entire COVID.
Can't we give them community service?
Yeah, they can pick up all the masks that are left on the sidewalk and street and the curbs and gutters.
Well, I mean, joking aside, is community service an option?
I wouldn't think so.
That goes through, there's a process with that, I would believe.
Chief,
Whatever.
is that a serious issue as far as littering is concerned with masks? Are you seeing that as an issue?
I think if you walk through Walmart's parking lot right now, you're going to see it as an issue.
I pick up masks every day.
Yeah.
This is Chad. I've started to see a few downtown.
Yeah. So I think we want to make sure that we have what's the effect if the police stop. I guess I thought I had that clear in my head, but I don't think I do.
Well, we did say that people would be asked to put a mask on. Let's see, any business law. We kind of had it outlined that it was education, and then if a person just literally refused, I mean, it's very much like what Walmart is doing.
Comes down to trespass.
I took out trespassing, yeah, and I put civil infraction. If the individual continues to refuse to leave a business or continues to, I mean, it's really about leaving, right? Because they're going to be indoors. We're not talking about outdoors. So
that's a criminal trespass charge if they refuse to leave. That's kind of what we're looking at right now with Walmart.
Have you been called out to Walmart? Just curious.
We have not. Nope.
And do you have any idea how many numbers or how many people go to Walmart? Do you have any clue per day?
Say it again.
How many people come and go into Walmart every day?
I don't, but I know they've got counters at the front door. I'll bet you'd be an easy phone call to find out what their numbers
Yeah.
are like today.
They do when you come in. They have people that are, they only went down to one door in and one door out, but they have people that are standing there taking statistics. So,
It goes without saying that I don't want the fear of one or two people who may or may not put up a huge stink prevent us from doing what we know is right. Most people, when said, hey, this is the law, buckle up. Hey, this is the law, wear a helmet. Hey, this is the law, blank. Do it, right? They just do because they don't want to see Dave's face, right? Or they don't, but as a council, I think it behooves us to do what's right and what we know will protect our community. And at this moment, that's masks.
Yeah, I would say your thing about face shields isn't appropriate to put in.
Are we obligated then to provide masks?
My question, are you going to provide other businesses that don't have them now?
Do we have to provide seatbelts to cars? I don't believe so.
I mean,
I think, some of this stuff where it's where it goes back is that in some of those instances, there are solid laws. There isn't a solid law in this instance. Only if you do it from the local level. I'm not trying to, I'm just stating.
I'm sure if we asked the Winneshiek Seamsters Union and said, this business needs masks, they would make them. There'd be 20,000 masks for our community. I have every confidence that you can get a mask if you need one. And businesses can certainly get masks if they need them. And many of our businesses are. And again, I think what we're doing is we're making it a uniform decision so that we're not putting the onus on a business owner to have to decide, ooh, am I going to be the business that's perceived this way or the business that's perceived this way?
Mayor, I
Randy,
think,
how much does a mask cost? Randy, this is Ross. If we, not to put you on the spot, but if you buy bulk masks through Story Kenworthy, aren't they about 39 cents a piece?
Well, you get 50 of them for $32, whatever that breaks down to.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'll bring some of these comments and questions to John and get this document tightened up.
Okay.
With Andy, Johanna, and Emily before Monday, and then show a next version, I guess, on Monday, and then the council can go from there.
Great.
Okay.
And Chad, we can all show up to the county health who want to, right? That's fine. That's public meeting, so we can be there.
This 5 is a public meeting, that's right.
Yeah.
And do we want, how do we want to handle the education committee or whatever we want to do with Krista and launching an education campaign?
Well, I think like you said earlier in this discussion, there's a small group committee that wants to meet and work through those logistics. We can do that.
Okay.
I do know that Lisa Scott, Lisa Radke, Kathleen Jacobson, that's from Luther, they have been meeting as well. You could pretty easily pull together people on that order in a Zoom meeting. It'd be almost like the community forum stuff that we did, only do it Zoom-wise. You get a listing of the people that you want to come in and support. It'd be pretty easy to get people together to have conversation with it, I think.
You have a lot of contacts, Lorraine.
Yeah.
Would you compile a list of people that you'd like to see at the table?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I have sort of got one pulled together, but I'll be sure and put that together and get it out to council members.
Yeah, and even if you did the inviting to say that, the cities would like to embark on an educational campaign that's connected across all of our organizations would be great.
Sure. Okay,
On the chat, I put a comment, Ross.
Thank you.
I also know that there's businesses, I mean, you've probably seen that too. I know Decorah Bank had some that went like crazy and they're bringing in more. I did see on Rotary today that I think they are looking to order masks for people who want them through Rotary. So there's beginning to be businesses and different people that want to use them as advertising for one thing, I think. But okay, anything else? Okay,
That's it.
okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Good day.
Ross.